Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. Normally on the Working Well podcast, we're talking about leadership development, workplace well-being, things that companies can do to improve well-being in the workplace. So today's topic is related to that, but it's something that came out of my background in health and fitness. For those of you who aren't aware, I was a health and fitness coach, personal trainer, well-being consultant for many years, and worked with thousands of athletes and corporate professionals on improving their health, well-being, and performance. And one of the things that came up quite often was nutrition. People always wanted the best nutrition plan. And over the past 30-something years, I've seen all kinds of diet trends come and go. One of the more persistent ones is intermittent fasting. And I've written a couple of lengthy blog posts on this, and I'll put those in the show notes so you can access those blog posts. And I hadn't really talked to clients about it in a while. I know there are still some people out there that do that, and I've expressed my opinion multiple times on how I don't think intermittent fasting is very effective. I think it can have a small place at certain points, but how the majority of people implement it is highly ineffective. And I was coming at it from a weight loss standpoint, and I don't think it really works well for weight loss from a long-term perspective because it's not approached with the right mindset. And those of you who've read some of my other material in my books, the Fitness Curveball, I outline the 4 pillars of personal performance: mindset, habits, movement, and fuel, in that order of importance. And when we talk about intermittent fasting, people are doing that, in my perspective, from a flawed mindset perspective. They're restricting themselves purposefully to lose weight, which might be great from a short-term perspective if you need to accomplish a certain goal in a short amount of time. But from a long-term sustainability standpoint, it's really ineffective, and it actually sets up a self-perpetuating cycle of what we call the diet yo-yo. Now, with that being said, I've said my opinion multiple times over the years, and like I said, written a couple of the blog posts on it. I talk to clients about it all the time. A study just came out from the American Heart Association, and this was a study of over 20,000 people over between 8 to 17 years. So a long-term study with a large number of people. And what they found is that people who followed an 8-hour time-restricted eating schedule, and that's the typical or very common 16-8 fasting cycle. So you fast for 16 hours and then you eat during an 8-hour window throughout the day. They found that type of eating schedule had a 91% higher risk of death from cardiovascular disease. That's massive, highly significant, and anyone who's doing intermittent fasting needs to be aware of it. People with heart disease or cancer also had an increased risk of cardiovascular death when they were following that cycle. And so in the study, the authors said, compared with a standard schedule of eating across 12 to 16 hours per day instead of only the 8-hour window, limiting food intake to less than 8 hours per day was not associated with living longer. So when we look at what people are actually doing to lose weight, it's often creating significant long-term impacts on their health, which means we need to think more effectively and differently about how we're approaching nutrition. Now, where this comes back to the Working Well podcast is that any company is filled with employees, and employees are part of what we call the general population. I, for years, have worked with corporate executives, coaching them on health, well-being, performance, and again, nutrition comes up all the time. So your employees, for leaders out there, your team members, your employees are doing these types of eating regimens. And if it's creating a 90% or 91% increase in cardiovascular death, that's a major risk. So incorporating effective nutrition is part of most workplace well-being programs, yet it tends to get rolled out as part of a Heart Health Month or whatever, some one-off seminar. I believe what we really need is to look a bit deeper at the strategy that we have behind not just nutrition, but what I call the personal performance paradigm, the mindset, the habits, the movement, the fuel. What are the things people are doing in each of those areas to produce better health, better energy, better performance in work and life? That's something that companies aren't really addressing. Again, keep in mind, most traditional wellness programs have some aspect of those things in there. However, there's a difference between offering random programs and creating a strategic plan designed to elicit specific behavioral change or health outcomes. That's very different. It's the same equivalent to saying, oh, I invest in the stock market and I invest in mutual funds, but I just sort of pick them with a Scrabble board, and or I spin a spinner and whatever one it lands on, or I just pick the most popular one of the day. It's not a strategy. Well, maybe not a very effective one. But the idea is that as leaders, as organizations, how are we positively impacting the health outcomes that our employees are having? And we know that 2 out of every 3 people these days are either overweight or obese, and that the fastest growing segment of that is the obesity segment, with about 50-50 between overweight and obesity right now. Now, that's tripled or quadrupled in the last 30 to 40 years, depending on which stats and which countries you look at, which means that it's not a genetic thing. There's a difference in lifestyle. There's a difference in, I was talking with a researcher earlier today about gene expression and how our environmental factors might be changing the expression of our genes to create some of the challenges that we're facing right now, whether we're talking about low-level inflammation across the body, obesity, autoimmune diseases. All kinds of things are skyrocketing these days because of our environment, our behaviors, and the ways we're approaching those 2 factors. So as companies, we have a massive opportunity to help people, but it requires a bigger picture strategy. It requires the executive team sitting down to say, hey, what are the biggest hot buttons for our employee base? And how are we specifically addressing them? Not just from an information standpoint, because every EFAT plan and wellness portal out there has all the nutrition articles, has all here's a workout plan you can download. Those resources are available, but they're not being utilized in the way that's most effective. Most people only utilize them when they're desperate. It's a user self-serve model. So employees will only go there to seek the counseling if they're feeling depressed or if they get referred to someone. Yes, some people do go seek it on their own, but generally when they're facing undue challenges or stress. Now, as an organization, we have an opportunity to help build that into our culture, build healthy, happy, positive behavioral change into not just our wellness program, but into the day-to-day policies, procedures, operations of the business. Now keep in mind, we're not dictating how people need to live and exercise. We're consistently putting not just the information, but the tools, resources, and opportunities to engage in those activities that wouldn't be there in a traditional wellness program. And I often talk about the difference between wellness and well-being. And it's an important distinction to talk about right now, because as I'm saying this, a lot of people are out there saying, oh yeah, well, our company already does this. We do nutrition lunch and learns, and we have this mindfulness app, and we do all these things. And I say, that's great. Those are awesome tools in your toolbox. How do they fit with the organizational strategy around improving performance and well-being? And are they actually improving well-being? Now, wellness I define as the tactics, the actions that you take with the goal of improving well-being. And well-being is the state of being, the outcome that happens from ideally doing wellness things. And when we look at it more closely, things like those EFAP portals and the wellness portals and the mental health apps, they're generally not producing the results that are needed to create bigger picture change in individuals and ROI for the company. We know that most of those portals, success is an 8 to 10%, maybe 20% in the most extreme cases in terms of engagement in those resources across the company. So if only 20% of the people max are engaging with it, and it's usually around 10% or even less, that means we're still missing the boat in terms of behavioral change. And again, a great tool in the toolbox, a resource to pull at from some time. But what people forget is that there are other factors that are involved in creating well-being that are outside the traditional scope of wellness programs. And that's a really important factor to consider. And the biggest ones are the impact of leadership, impact of corporate culture. And it's a whole other podcast to dive into what corporate culture means. But essentially it comes out to the daily actions, habits, mindset that we approach the day-to-day operations of our business that create the employee experience and customer experience to some extent as well. But that's what corporate culture is really about. And corporate culture has some of the biggest impact on well-being out there. You can have all the wellness amenities, check all the boxes out there. If your corporate culture sucks, it's not going to matter. People are still going to be stressed out, burnt out, disengaged. So where I'm going to the intermittent fasting here, and again, we got back to the wellness side, but it's all connected, because when we decide and strategically curate a corporate culture around well-being and performance and discussing things on a consistent basis, like the foods you're eating, how you're moving, setting up a structure in the day where you have healthy options available for food, where you have ability to move your body, to engage in activity, perhaps while you're even meeting with colleagues and doing work. We know that creativity improves. We know that focus and resilience and mental health improve when we move our body, yet most companies are doing the opposite for employees. They're essentially chaining people to a desk, figuratively, hopefully not literally, but people are on Zoom meetings or Teams calls for 8 to 10 hours a day. They have to sit at their computer. Whether they have the camera off or not, they're there. In the office, it's very similar. So as leaders, what culture in our team, never mind the bigger organizational culture at this point, what culture in our team are we creating that allows us to positively impact the people on our team from a mindset, habits, movement, and fuel standpoint? When we can do that, our team will perform at such a higher level. We will have more satisfaction as a leader. The organization benefits. And again, this is simple, very straightforward. The concepts have been there for ages. as a personal trainer starting in the industry, C-level executives, VP level executives were coming to me to learn these skills. And that's how I got into the fitness industry. That's how I got into the corporate wellness industry. I was basically fixing stressed out, burnt out, broken down, beaten up corporate executives and helping them get their mindset, habits, movement, and fuel back on track so they could see the results they want and perform at their best in life. Then they would say, hey, why don't you come in and talk to my team about this? This is really cool. No one's ever presented it this way before. And so I started doing seminars and workshops. And then these same companies would say, hey, you know what? We're thinking about building a gym in our space. Can you run some programs out of there? Can you tell us what equipment we need? And that led me into designing and managing fitness centers for large corporate clients. And we've had multinational companies that we've run facilities for. The interesting thing is, there was still a gap. And if we go back to corporate culture and leadership mindset, we're running these multi-million-dollar facilities for large corporate clients, yet we're seeing the same, call it 10% of people that would use a gym whether the company had one or not. And then that got us thinking, well, hey, you know what? What about the other 90% of employees? What programs are we running for them? So we started doing traditional workplace wellness programs. We were checking the boxes off. Hey, we're doing nutrition seminars. Hey, we're doing wellness challenges. We're doing wellness weeks, wellness fairs, all these things that were one-off activities. And then we realized there was a gap there. We'd have people coming to us saying, you know what? We love the gym. We'd love to go. But my boss wouldn't look too kindly on it if I went to the gym in the day. And I've got kids, and with my schedule, it's hard to make it there before work or after work. So I'm just not going. I'm not utilizing that resource. And when we start looking at leadership mindset, this distinction between the wellness program and then the real work that gets done, that's where we see the difference. And that's what got me into executive coaching and the organizational performance strategy, consulting with companies and leaders to set up programs that are not just effective, but that are bought into the company culture, helping leaders shift their mindset to see the opportunities that are available from a people performance standpoint and an organizational performance standpoint, because those two things go hand in hand. So to come back full circle to the intermittent fasting and the 91% higher risk of death from cardiovascular disease, we want to look at how does this all fit together in your organization? Just even from your leadership mindset perspective, how is this resonating? Have you checked all the boxes, but are maybe not seeing the results in your organization? If so, please reach out. Call me, DM me. I'd love to connect. I'd love to hear what's working for your company, what's not, what your vision is for the future. And I'd love to help you put that in place. timboris.com. Just go to the contact page, reach out there. On LinkedIn, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Tim Boris. Thank you so much. We'll see you on the next episode.